I know you're a long way from what really is home, but this must feel like home to you, doesn't it, Neil?
Do you know, sitting here, Bob, I remember when I drove down, having just got married with my missus, and we parked up outside of there, and there was no one on the ground. It was a Sunday, and I looked across and I thought, well, this is going to be my life for a period of time. And I said to her, what do you think of the ground? Having come from Old Trafford, she said to me, it's beautiful, it's a stunning club ground, where do we go now? She had no idea that this was where my future was going to be.
Could you have possibly thought back then that you would just stay in this part of the world?
I think there was still a little bit of me wanting to go back and play cricket in South Africa and potentially retire in South Africa. Circumstances invariably change as you get older. But I had to, Worcester was a new period of my life. I wasn't sure whether 1 year was going to be 2 years, 4 years, or as it turned out, 11 years. So, interesting. It's a beautiful part of the world.
And very different to what you've been used to in Manchester, wasn't it?
Well, I had to travel literally 50 minutes every day, living in a place called Oswald Twistle. And you say that when you've had a few. And driving all the way down the motorway on my own, occasionally getting a lift with Flat Jack Simmons or Graham Fowler or somebody like that. And then you arrive at a test venue that is literally all brick and mortar. Certainly a change coming here, It's very rural. It feels rural, albeit it's in a city. It's still rural, and I'm glad we've kept that with the infrastructure that we've built over the period of time. It's one of the few grounds that people can still walk around and watch cricket without the hindrance of a slab of concrete.
Surviving that journey with Graham Fowler must have been an achievement in itself, wasn't it?
Yeah, early days for me in my career, and it was unfortunate really because I didn't see a lot of the lads bar the dressing room. I was, waiting in the wings in essence, still being classified as a foreign player, albeit that I was going through the qualification period. What fond memories of my time there, fond memories. But obviously Graham moved on and did things, played for England. I'm pleased about that. Bernard Reedy, those players, Flat Jack, I can remember Bumble and Clive Lloyd being captain, Stephen Jeffries there and Michael Holding, all the great names. Great names.
As you refer there to Bumble, David Lloyd, I mean, was he every bit the character in those days in the dressing room that he is now, that he's a television pundit?
I think he's a very good pundit, and I think he is a breath of fresh air for television because he has this northern humour, which typically the southerners don't have. He did. I mean, he's always made fun of people, always had a joke for someone, and it's always been what he is. He's never really changed. He's just got older.
So I'm wondering then, you were born in what was then called Northern Rhodesia. It is no longer, of course. What was the journey from there to Manchester then?
My father worked on the Copper Belt until I was the age of 7.5, and then he got a transfer down to Cape Town as part of De Beers. Worked in the dynamite part of De Beers, and then he moved back up to the Transvaal and worked with Anglo-American for the rest of his mining life. Always been in mining. So we moved to and fro from Zambia to Cape Town to me eventually going to school in Johannesburg as a boarder. I then did my military service, which was compulsory in those days, conscription for all. Did a year of that. And then whilst I was playing, obviously I played cricket for South African schools, so there was going to be some sort of transition going into a higher level in terms of age groups and club cricket and so on. I played for Western Transvaal, which was the country districts where I was based as an army soldier. And then from there I got the trials to go and play for Transvaal. In the winter period, obviously, what was I going to do? Do I go back into higher education? And someone said to me, why don't you come over and have a go playing cricket in England? And that's how it all started, really. I met a chap called Alan Jones, who was then captain of Glamorgan. He'll probably not remember me, but Alan was brilliant because I was in Wales basically to watch rugby, because that was my first love. I don't know how I ended up in cricket, but rugby was where I wanted to be. And it was in the March months that I had a 3-month visa, watching Wales play rugby, making sure my hair grew again, enjoying life, having been out of the military. And Alan said, come to our indoor nets. And from there, Swansea Cricket Club said, look, would you like to consider staying for our summer and playing? We've heard good things coming back from Alan. And as a young lad that had no real future in anything, for someone to actually say, well, we'll look after you and sort your digs out and buy you the odd beer, was pleasant. And as it turned out, I had 2 months with them, and a chap called Tony Caudle, who was then the coach at Glamorgan County Cricket Club, asked me if I'd be interested in going up and playing as a substitute professional in the Lancashire League. And most people that know cricket will know that the Lancashire League is synonymous with some seriously famous names. And I thought, well, one, I don't know where Lancashire is, and certainly don't know anything about the league, but I'm keen to go and have a game of cricket. And I went up and played for Burnley versus East Lancs. East Lancs was the headquarters of Lancashire League cricket, and their pro on that day was a chap called Alan Border. So welcome to the big time, Neal Radford.
You said you played very successfully at schoolboy level, so your promise was seen at an early level then, obviously, young age.
It's difficult to say what is talent. I mean, I think you could see talent at a 15-year-old, but that 15-year-old, by the time he's 18, may no longer be a talent. I didn't know that I was going to be a first-class cricketer. I had no aspiration to be a first-class cricketer. All I wanted to do was get a BCom degree and work in finance, play rugby, and play a bit of club cricket. That's it. That was my bit. But as it turned out, the military allowed me to express myself as a sportsman, and I'm sure you'll find that around the world. And then from there, I ended up having the opportunity to come to Wales, watch a bit of rugby, and as fate turned out, my direction was turned by someone else who asked me to come to indoor nets. And from the indoor net element, I then went in to play club cricket. Lancashire saw me, invited me for trials. They then were keen on signing me as a professional cricketer. And in the winter months when I went back to South Africa, I was then playing club cricket, and I got the attention of some of the selectors by putting in good performances. And I think, if you've played at that level as a youngster and you go into club cricket, you should stand out. And as it turned out, I mean, I finished the army in 1978-79, and that year I was playing for Transvaal.
I was just going to ask you about your time in the military. I know you had no choice, everybody had to do it. What I do know about you, Neal, is that you're very much your own man. How did you get on with the military?
Well, it's an interesting process, because at the age of 16 you get a green form sent to you from the government, and you are obliged to fill it in, because you've got your teacher watching you while you do it. And there are 4 little boxes, and the 4 boxes said to me, Army, Air Force, Navy or Police. Well, I wanted to travel the world, so I ticked the Navy box and ended up being in the artillery. Thank you very much. The issue is you either get on and you do it and you get through your time, or you have a problem with it. And I realized that there was no point in fighting the system, and the system was hard. I mean, the first 6 weeks, all you do is learn about the army, you learn about your fellow man, you learn about everything that goes on in the army, and then from there on, it's hell. They drill you and drill you and drill you, so that when you do go into the army and you do go into conflict, you know what you're doing. That's working with a rifle, buddying, falling over ground, running into trenches, all sorts of stuff. But going back to your point about me being my own man, the critical thing about the army, and I'll be quite honest about it, I think it's the best thing that ever happened to me, because it treated me self-discipline. And in sport, you need to have self-discipline. But I think the greatest thing that came out of me being in the army was my respect for fellow men. You are singly minded and you want to do your own thing, but in life it's not about that, because you can have this channeled energy, but sometimes you need to have a collection of people to help you get through it. And when you think of team sport is, yes, there are individuals playing a sport, but collectively you're a unit, and that's critical.
I can see you being good with the team aspect of it, because that's what you've done. I'm just thinking that there might have been times when you stood there and thought, I would like to argue the point with what I've just been told to do. Were you ever tempted?
I think there were many a time when I thought, if I find this bombardier outside this camp, I'm going to kill him. Because that's the way it is. His job is to, put you under strain. That's what his job is to do. He's been there. People prior to him were doing it. So his job is to make sure that you are a fighting machine. And in all honesty, when you look back after you've done your spell, you shake hands with a man and look him in the face and say, thank you for your time. And I think that's the important thing. He did his job.
Did you get to play any sport while you were doing this this year?
Yeah, absolutely. I was. Once you got past that probation period, and you then get into the rigmarole, and bearing in mind I was there for a year, so that you'll have your winter period and you'll have your summer period, and basically in the winter you're playing rugby, in the summer you're playing cricket or hockey. And most of the facilities in the army development camps were fantastic. I was based in a place called Potchefstroom, which is in the Western Transvaal, big mining area. Wonderful big playing fields, massive big rugby areas, super cricket oval. So if you have any aspiration to be a sportsman, you'd rather be pushing to be playing on the park than running around carrying packs on your back. And I think I quickly realized which way I wanted to go.
You said as well that rugby was perhaps your first love. Did you at what point did cricket take over from it then?
Difficult to say. I mean, I played serious rugby at school. I played serious rugby when I was in the army. I played for the Defence Force at rugby. I was at fullback. And I think it's, when you put them on a par, there was more passion for rugby than there was for cricket. But when I had finished my military service, I then had about a period of 4 to 5 months before I had the opportunity to maybe fly to Wales, which I ended up doing, because in those days there was no finer rugby nation globally. The late 70s, early 80s, Wales was the place to watch and play rugby. And I thought, well, I'd like to go just for a short period of time and just go and watch a bit of rugby. Go and watch club rugby, see what it's all about, maybe have the opportunity to play a bit. And it was, my father got me a job in the mines. I did a short period of time as a what do they call a skipman. Interesting job. You sit in a cage and you ring bells to your driver, who runs a big hoist with a massive cable, which is a big metal cable that's nearly that thick, and the only correspondence is no phone or anything, it's bells. So if I wanted to go from one level to other, it was by bells. You ring the bells, and you communicated that way. And I did that for 6 months, and earned the first time ever, I earned some serious dosh, which I thought was serious dosh, and afforded me the opportunity to certainly buy the groceries for Mum, but buy an air ticket. And I got an air ticket to Wales, and I didn't know where I was going to go. I just had an air ticket. I'll find my way, and that's the plan. And I ended up in Wales, in Swansea, and watching rugby. And it was purely by chance that Alan Jones was at a game, and we had the opportunity to meet one another. And he said, "Where are you staying?" I said, "I'm staying in a place called Verlin." He said, "Fine, leave it with me. I'd like to see if I can help you out." And he did. And I think realistically, Alan Jones was responsible for me becoming a first-class cricketer. And if I have to honestly be... interesting times. You look back and you think, most of the lads today, they're just... So either you go through a school process, you go into club cricket, you go into... I had a strange way of getting there, but I got there.
You never wanted to go back to your homeland full-time then?
I think when you've been raised in a certain part of the world, you'll always have fond memories of that part of the world. It stays in your blood. Every time I go back to South Africa, I know I'm back home. And there's a little tear in my eye, and I get a lump in my throat when I get back there. But I think you have to be realistic, and my life is here. You know, this is where I raised my children. My wife's here, my father-in-law lives with us. Our life is here. So when we do go back to Africa, it's mainly for a holiday. So we switch on and switch off and we come back. I miss the place. It's a great climate, wonderful people, aesthetically so pleasing on the eye wherever you travel. But I think I'm fully English now.
Of course, you were brought up and lived through times of apartheid. How much were you aware of it? Was it part of your life, and was it something you just accepted because that's how it was?
No, I think as a child growing up in that sort of era, you may know that there's a black bus and a white bus, but you don't realistically have anything to do with it, because, as I say, as a young lad going to school, when I finished my school I went into the military, and funny enough, in the military it was all white. You know, there was very little black, if I can use that terminology. And you learn about it at school. I went to boarding school, and the school was mainly white, different cultures, different people from different areas. And there was the segregation, you know, black kids went to black schools, white kids went to white schools, and so went on. And yes, I mean, if you look back in history, it's probably a period of South Africa that they won't be very proud of. But when you grow up in that, you don't really see it. I think you adults knew about it. I mean, my father worked on the mines and worked with migrants, and there's still migrants traveling all over Africa working on those mines, and will continue to be. And yes, the people that were in power and the officials were typically white.
And it was what you'd grown up with and what everybody expected. I mean,
I think you
probably wasn't questioned so much, was it?
It was not questioned. No, it was not questioned. Certainly, not from my perspective, I didn't really say, "Dad, why? You know, why is that going on there? Why is that going on?" I think it's just you grow up and you understand that, you know, peaches grow on trees, and when they fall off, you eat them. Yeah. I think as time has changed, I mean, the country has changed as well, and it's probably more challenging now for white people in South Africa than it ever was.
Do you remember the first time when you suddenly thought to yourself, "Look, I've been around the world, I've done this, I've done that, and when I'm in England, people, whatever colour they are, they all mix together." And did you ever think, well, why wasn't it like that when I was growing up?
Well, I remember I only started travelling when I was, you know, finished my military service. By then, obviously, I knew a little bit about what was going on. I mean, you know, you're 17, 18 years of age, you should know what's going on. Prior to that, you're in boarding school, you're in your boarding house, you go home and see parents on the weekend. You don't actually see it. And I think things were changing. I think the national government were trying to change things towards the latter part of their reign, trying to make it easier and appease the lower class and the blacks.
Of course, I mean, there were other players from South Africa over here. You obviously mingled with and talked with, and was there ever a moment when you kind of stopped and thought, I've missed out on something, it's very different, why is it so different, is it better here, was it better what I was used to?
You can travel around the world and you can say, well, I only wish I'd been here before, you know, or if my parents had brought me here when I was a young child, I'd love to have come to this country at an earlier age. life is challenging in itself. You know, you don't always get the opportunity to travel. A lot of people in South Africa potentially will never ever travel, and they always will be based in South Africa, so they'll never see the world. Sport has allowed me the freedom to be able to travel the world and see different cultures and see different places. But I think realistically, your life, irrespective of where you move or travel, is about your family. You know, for me, it's family. It's, you know, that's the critical thing. As long as my family are safe, they enjoy where they are, they're in good schools, you can make your life around that. You don't have to think about, you know, maybe we should be going back to South Africa, or maybe I should have gone to Australia, or maybe I should be living in America, only purely because we had a good holiday. Life's always more challenging than a holiday. It's nice to go on holiday, but you have to come back to reality. So for me, I think the reason I settled in England was at a time when my wife's mother was terminally ill with cancer. I then decided that there was no point in me going back and playing cricket in South Africa for the 6 months, that we would stay here. She passed away, and then there was a period of, well, what happens to Dad? You know, is he going to stay on his own up north, or we decided to bring him and make him live with us. And so you can see there is that element of, you know, that bonding of family ties and support. And it wasn't all about me going back and playing cricket. It was more about making sure that, you know, Lynn and her dad were well.
So I was going to say, she's from Lancashire, isn't she? So like you, she came to somewhere completely new and had to get used to it.
She came out of the smoke, ended up down here, and I think she's been happy. I mean, I think that's a question you need to ask her, but at the end of the day, you know, sportsmen are challenging people to live with. You know, you live, breathe sport. It's hard because they don't see us in the mornings, and then we see them at night. We travel and spend days away. You play for England, you spend months away. It's a hard life for a cricket wife or sportsman's wife. And then when you bring the children up, I remember her bringing the children up, I was never there. Very hard for her. And those are things I regret, I really do regret. You know, on one hand, because you're challenging yourself, you're living the dream, you're a sportsman, man's greatest wish to be an international sportsman, no greater wish than being a, you know. And for me, you have to balance that out against bringing children up into this world.
So if I asked Lynn the question, would she say you were challenging to live with and be a husband?
I think she'll say I'm still challenging, or I'm still challenged.
Yeah.
No, I think Lynn's an honest northerner, and you know, I think the reason we've been together so long is because we've had tough moments. You know, every family goes through tough moments, and yeah, I might not be the easiest person to live with, that's for sure. But you know, there's give and take in every relationship.
I can't imagine either that she would have been impressed by the fact that you were a cricketer.
Well, to be quite honest, I remember meeting her for the first time in a pub in Lancashire, and it was whilst I was playing in the Lancashire League, because going from Wales, me ending up having that trial with Burnley, ended up me getting a 2-year contract with a club called Bacup. The Northerners would say it's Bacup on top of hill. And I ended up having 2 years. Anyway, I met her in a pub, and I remember taking her telephone number, but I didn't call her for a while. That obviously didn't go down too well. And I said, right, then I managed to call again. I said, I'll see you at one of the cricket clubs, Nelson Cricket Club. And she said, okay, fine, I'll see you there. Anyway, she turned up, and we had a couple of words at tea time. I thought, this is great, you know, I'll take her out for a meal afterwards. So I said, I'll see you later. And she said, I'll see you later. But in Lancashire, see you later means it could be next month, it could be a bloody year's time, it could be any time. So I was waiting around at the club 4 hours after the close of play, expecting this bird to turn up, and she didn't go down too well. But anyway.
I'm just amazed you waited around that long. You must have been impressed.
Yeah, I was impressed. Anyway, maybe desperate too. You never know. But no, I think I remember when she asked me the question. We were having a meal, and she said, "So, why are you in England?" And I said, "Well, I'm playing cricket." She said, "No, but what is your job?" And I said, "Well, I'm hoping that this will be my job." She said, "Well, I didn't realize that people get paid to play cricket." And I said, "Well, they do. Not greatly, but they do." And then when I first brought her to Worcester after we'd got married, she was quite amazed to think that this was the place that I was going to spend the rest of my playing career.
Do you enjoy your time playing for Lancashire?
Bit clouded, really. I was going through a process of opening the bowling for the best side I'd ever played for in Transvaal and not getting a chance playing at Lancashire, and I just couldn't work that one out. I didn't think there were any better bowlers. I know that I was going through a qualification period, and yes, Michael Holding was on the books at the time, and so was Clive Lloyd, but even when they were injured, I didn't play as much as I should have played. That was the most disappointing thing for me. And when I look back, it was a journey from one point to another via Lancashire, and all the things that came with it. But yeah, could have done and should have done a lot more.
So from there to here, how did that come about then?
Well, basically, I had qualified, which is quite strange. They'd spent all the time putting the energy and effort into Lords to get me qualified. I had to spend a certain period of time in. I had to buy a house in Lancashire. I had to go through that process of wanting to be a first-class cricketer, professional cricketer, an English cricketer. And then they decided that I was surplus to requirement, which I found quite strange, considering that I was doing well in the Lancashire League week on, doing well in the second team, playing for one of the strongest teams in world cricket, and I couldn't get into the Lancashire team. So it may have been a blessing in disguise, to be quite honest, because it allowed me then to come to this club. Worcester weren't on the list. I mean, I hadn't played at and knew much about English cricket. So realistically, where my future was going, I didn't have an agent, as they all do now. And before I knew it, a chap called John Inchmore, who I played with in my army days, knew that Lancashire had decided to release me, and he said, "We need, get him here." And I ended up coming here, mainly because of the connection between John Inchmore and Fernley. They knew my past. Duncan was my bat sponsor, so. The critical thing about being a sportsman, certainly a bowler, is that what happened yesterday, and I'm now focused on what happens tomorrow. And I'll get through the day, I can put my feet up and then think about the next day, and so it goes on to the next day. And what I wanted to do here, and you're dead right, this was a very, very, very nice environment to play cricket in. It wasn't a test ground, it wasn't a concrete jungle, it was a rural club that had nice people. Nice back office people, great committee, supportive, good captain, good young lads, all enjoying the brotherhood of being professional cricketers, and I think that's very important.
And I mean, around that time, Worcester had some great success. And they had some good players here, didn't they?
Good players come from playing, and good players come from the environment they play in, and that's why I say, the reason I was so successful is because I was allowed to express myself. The critical thing as a sportsman, you can't be hampered. And I would say that about everybody here. We had a good bunch of lads. Phil Newport was a great bowler, went on to England. Tim Curtis, very underrated, scored loads and loads of runs. D'Oliveira, you name it. My good friend Smudger, he was here after being at Surrey, and then Neely there, and Rhodesy came down from Yorkshire. Both turned up, drank all the beer, and then Dill came down from Kent. We had prior to the two big names turning up here, we had a young squad of players that were always knocking on the door, yet not really being successful. Individually doing well, but as a team getting close but not close enough. And I think realistically, when Beefy turned up in '87, I think it was, he was the catalyst for us to taste success on a regular basis, and instill that sort of go out and play hard and compete and support and never stop dying. I think you have that as an individual. Somehow it's in there, but it takes someone else to bring it out of you.
I was going to say, how does the dressing room react when you knew that Ian Botham was coming here? It was a successful side. You've mentioned some, there were some big names around there.
Keppel Dev was there during that period.
Keppel Dev was there.
Yeah.
You were there. Graham Dilly was there, and so on and so on. There were some big names. Dare I say, probably some big egos in there. And then suddenly, here's Ian Botham. I mean, did the dressing room think, wow?
Well, I mean, I wouldn't say that Ian was. His career was finished as a cricketer or Test cricket at that point. He still had a lot to offer, and I think offering is not just about batting and bowling. Offering is about man management, being able to take someone and put their arm around them and guide them and support them, whether that be good or bad, and critically, to be part of a team. Winning is so tasteful. Once you've had that, it's like a good claret, you just want a bit more. And that was what we needed, and he instilled that in us. I think we all respected the fact that he was coming to the club. We weren't quite sure how it would go, how it would pan out. Everybody was glad to have him in the dressing room, but never really enforced their way on him, because invariably that came more from Ian. Ian was the person that dropped down a peg to be part of a more cosy club.
So in a dressing room like that, with some big names and a successful
we didn't
team.
mention Hickey as well.
I was going to say, yes, Graham Hickey. Yes.
Well, he was only a youngster then, but
can't really miss him out, can we? When somebody like that comes in, does it change the dynamic of the dressing room?
It's bound to. It's bound to, because realistically, at the end of the day, in any working environment, you create an atmosphere. And then when someone foreign or something foreign comes into it, it's whether that foreign object blends in or doesn't blend in. And as it turns out, we all knew that he would blend in, because he is what he is, larger than life. But we knew that he was going to bring a lot more than just his cricket batting and bowling. Fact.
I recorded a programme a few weeks ago with Phil Neal, who you just mentioned, who of course was the captain at the time. And pretty well all those names we've just mentioned, I mentioned them to him. I said there's some big names, some successful names, possibly one or two big egos in there. How did you manage them? And he sat back and he looked at me and he smiled and he said, if something had to be done, I did it. Is that a fair assessment of the way he did it, in that he would let things go as long as everything was okay and it was going all right on the pitch? He would just get involved if he had to, as he put it.
Phil knew, if you take Clive Lloyd, for example, and you ask Clive Lloyd the same sort of question, Clive basically would say, I didn't really have to captain my team. The team captained me, it managed me. I had great players, they all knew what they had to do. I didn't have to, in essence, father them or look after them. I think Phil was in the same sort of ball game. He had youngsters in the team that he had to nurture and support. And you're right, when the odd one gets out of line, there might be a little bit of how you need to resolve it. But I think he knew full well that he had cricketers in his brief that were capable of doing their jobs at a very good level. Which means that in essence your remit as a captain is just to maintain and manage. Make the right decisions in terms of the team, pick the right people for certain games, and then those that are on the fringe, be able to support and look after them. And I think Phil did a good job doing that. I've always found Phil to be very affable, very easy with people. I think that's one of the reasons why he's done such a good job with England, in terms of his capacity as manager. He's very good with people, and you don't have to show it with your batting, or with your bowling, or anything out of the norm. It's like Clive Rice, you know. If you want to go on to about captains, here was a bloke that was highly respected by anybody in cricket, highly respected by the brotherhood of Transvaal in terms of the cricketers that played under him. And bearing in mind that when I played in that period, 8 of the players were Springboks, played for South Africa, and were playing for South Africa because they had the Rebel Series and all that. 2 of them were 2 of the finest West Indians that I've had the privilege of playing with, in Alvin Kallicharran and Sylvester Clarke. And then there's me trying to qualify as English. I could have certainly stayed and tried to qualify and become a Springbok, but that's not where I was going. I wanted to play English cricket. So when Clive said, right lads, Thursday night, 5 o'clock nets, bearing in mind there was only 3 in that team, including Clive, that were professionals. Well, Clive was semi-pro at that time because he had finished, but he was doing a bit of managing. But there was Cully, me, and Sylvester Clarke. And if he said 5 o'clock, nobody in their capacity, and Graham Pollock was managing director of a firm, Henry Fotheringham was managing director, Ray Jennings was CEO of some company, none of them turned up past 4:30. That was the respect, not just for Clive, but they had for one another. This empathy, this bond, this want to be with you, you know. You looked around the dressing room, I was in the baby in the team, and I looked around the dressing room and I thought, God, these are world-class cricketers. World-class cricketers. And so that goes back to that captaincy thing. It's how you leave your mark on your team, and Phil did a great job.
I mean, and he had a very good career. I mean, people sometimes forget just how many runs he did score himself.
Absolutely.
But I was just thinking more in terms of if you've got guys in the dressing room, and Botham's probably the prime example. It's like Kevin Peterson nowadays, isn't, in terms of stature?
Yes.
If in nothing else. Can it be difficult? I mean, can they turn around like they do in football and say, well, show us your medals? Or do people respect them to a point, and did all of you respect the way that this club was run and what was happening on the field?
No, I never ever saw that. I think Ian is above that, to be quite honest. He respects management. Yeah, he is a tough one to maintain and look after, but that never happened here. Never ever happened. And I think he would have been more supportive of Phil and giving guidance and support, and Phil being able to turn around to him and say, right, you know, as opposed to the other way around. Not in my eyes, I didn't see it.
You played 3 tests and 6 one-days, didn't you? Do you remember your first test?
I do remember my first test. It was at Edgbaston against India. And I don't know whether the writing was on the wall then, but bear in mind, I mean, it was a tough time for English cricket. We didn't have central contracts. The England management were chopping and changing. There was no consistency in terms of selection. So you're coming into a team you hardly know. For me, I mean, I found it challenging in itself, because I remember turning up the day prior to the test and walking into a dressing room, and people were just sitting around and no one was there to greet you, shake your hand, well done Neil, congratulations, nothing. You just ended up walking into the nets to go and have a bowl. That wouldn't happen today. You know, I go back to the brotherhood, I go back to that, you know, starting my early days as in the army and looking after your fellow man. It was too cliquey, far too cliquey. It was all about self-esteem and people looking after self-preservation, because there was no central contract. Nobody wanting you to do well, rather than, you know, I'd rather do well. So that didn't bode well to start. And I remember the test match against Gavaskar getting dropped first by Pringle at slip when he didn't have 10, and then in chipping one to cover and Bill Athy dropping it, and I thought, this is not going to be right for me. And as it turned out, I think I went for a few that day. I went for a few. Not a great start, but you know, you live and learn. But when you consider that you take 100 wickets in a season, I think you've got to be more than capable of taking more test wickets than just the 3 that I took. or the 3 tests I played.
Yes, I mean, I'm just thinking on what you've said so far, that though it was nice to be called up, and I'm sure you were as delighted as anyone else was, or has ever been since, it wasn't the be-all and end-all to you, was it?
It should have been. It should have been. It's the highest you can get as a professional sportsman. You can't go any higher than that, and it should have been. But it hasn't left a lot, a fond memory in my heart. And I think, based on what I've just said, there was no real brotherhood. It was too cliquey, too many people doing their own thing, and it was like a clock in, clock out job. Typical salesperson coming in and doing his daily job and then going back. I don't feel belonging.
You can't play professional sport like that, can you?
No, it's not good. It's not good. That's why today, when you watch the England setup and you see these lads, they have an affection for one another, and that's critical. And Neely is behind all of that. Phil Neal, he's in support. He's created that probably as well. They have a good captain. They have good support. There's people there to look after them. I'm not saying that you have to mother everything. I didn't expect that, but I just, someone being there to give me a, welcome, look after you. You're going into a test match, feel good, relax, enjoy yourself. Nothing like that. No real team talks or things like that basically would encourage you. So sometimes you come out of a club environment or a first-class environment, you go into a test, and you're not you. You're running up and bowling, but you're not you. You're not doing what you do on a daily basis. You're trying something different. And not very memorable, Bob.
Is almost the danger as well that you kind of feel you've got to try too hard?
Well, you try, absolutely, because when you're going into the game, you should be going into a game with a unit of 4 or 5 bowlers, and their job is to actually bowl the opposition out. Whether I get naught or fifer makes no difference. The bowling unit has been successful, and that wasn't the case. You've got guys there that are just looking after being successful themselves. So it didn't bode well. It didn't bode well. But that didn't stop me from trying. Rest assured, that did not stop me from trying.
I wouldn't for a moment have thought it was, but
no.
Knowing you as I do, I can imagine. I can see the passion in what you're telling me now. I can imagine at that time, almost the annoyance you would have been feeling that, well, come on guys, what are we doing?
Yeah, I would say I did feel a little bit of that. And then I got selected to go on tour, and when I'm knocking people over on a regular basis in English cricket, and I know full well that I'm more than capable of playing and wearing the green cap, that English cap, that is annoying. That is terribly frustrating. Watching someone else bowling when you should be on the park doing the job. But I had the opportunity. I had a reasonable life out of it. I was allowed to travel the world, met some wonderful people, had a beer here, there and everywhere. And I think if you look back on that, yes, it could have been better and it could have been more memorable, but I did something that millions and millions and millions of people would have loved to have done and never did.
Do you like the way the game has gone, the extra day on the tests, the T20s and all the rest of it? Would it have suited you, do you think?
Bearing in mind that you've seen me play and you know my work ethic, I don't think it would have been too much of a problem anyway. I think I would have adapted. People have asked me, how do you see yourself in 2020? And I think you adapt, I was one of the first people to bowl a slower ball, Franklin Stevens and I used to have competitions who would bowl the slowest slow ball. And you learn these things as you try to better yourself. You don't play professional cricket to just play to earn a salary, because we didn't earn a lot. You try to see your name in Wisden. You try to show your fellow players that you are a notch above the rest. You try to be competitive on a daily basis. I had a room dedicated to wickets. This is an interesting story, but I had a whole wall dedicated to the amount of wickets I took on a season. So when we had the fixtures printed out in February or March, I would write all this. By the way, I had to repaint every wall. So I got the clearance from the missus, or what they call the government. I got the clearance. So on the wall, I'd have the teams, and then I'd have first innings and second innings. So when I was at home, I could put in whether I took 1, 0, 5, whatever it was, and then my end goal total was a minimum 75 first-class wickets. This wasn't one-day cricket or how many wickets I got in the net. This is purely championship. And that was it. So I would be away from home, and Lynn will see on CFAX, because there was no phoning up, all that stuff. She'd see on CFAX, right, he took 2 wickets, he didn't get any, he got murdered, or whatever it was. And the total would go in. And then it'll just tally itself out. But that was my church. And that's all I looked at and worshipped, was that wall. Because my remit was that whether it be Bob Hall opening the batting or Graham Gooch, to me, you were a number. I knew who you were, and I knew what you were capable of, but you were a number. And I had to make sure I had a certain amount of numbers knocked off so they can go on that wall. And that was the thing that drove me, to getting that 75, and that's what I averaged through my career, 75, 75, 75, 75.
So when you looked at who you were playing and where you were playing them, were those you thought, well, there's a fifer in that one.
Yes.
Could struggle in this one.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Oh, no,
I'm not
no
going to
doubt
ask
at all.
you who was whom, because it'll embarrass you, but
No.
I can take the point. So since you stopped playing cricket, you played some minor counties cricket, didn't you? You run your own business. You've got a bit of an interest in politics. You've had 2 sons who've played cricket fairly well. And this lass from Lancashire, who you waited outside for, and she'd gone away. So it's worked out all right in the end, hasn't it?
It has worked out all right, yes. I think the important thing is that I have my health, although I'm carrying a little bit of tonnage, as we all do, according to the missus. No, I'm still involved with cricket. I'm on the board here, and I give my 2 penneth worth. I want to give something back. That's a critical thing. I'm involved with the Lord Taverners as a charity. I run my golf days. It'll keep me busy. But I'm happy. I'm happy, Bob. You can have all sorts of things. You'd love to have a house in France and all that stuff, but you have to bring reality back to where you are and clear that, and then just make sure the path that you're on is a clear one, and just run it.
Neal Radford, I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Pleasure.
Thank you very much.